The third skill is positive communication skills. And that means both receptive and expressive language. When I communicate to other people in a positive, respectful manner, a manner that contributes to the well-being of all, and do I hear the communication of others? My receptive language, do I listen? And that means listening not only to verbal language, but nonverbal language as well. What do I communicate? And how well do I really communicate and listen from others? Again, going back to anybody that's been in school system, often hear people complain about, oh, he's not a good communicator or whatever. Well, where did we teach communication skills? Is that part of the curriculum? Because it's real important for the rest of your life. The fourth set of skills is the ability to work. I always like laughing about this one, called cooperation. Ability to work and play well with others. Now, it's interesting, that is a grade most children get on their report card in school in kindergarten and first grade. Little Johnny works and plays well with others, satisfactory, unsatisfactory, kind of things. And it's the only grade on your report card from kindergarten to grade 12 that actually correlates with future life success. People who accomplish things successful typically have the ability to work and play well with others as a team. We're a social animal. Each of us on our own is pathetic. We can't run fast enough to get tonight's dinner and trap them down. We haven't got teeth to rip it apart. We haven't got claws to hold it down. Not enough hair on our body to keep us warm in winter. We need to work together. One of the more interesting examples of that is taught in East Africa by Maasai tribe, where youth, when they go through the rite of passage, which many cultures have their rites of passage to adulthood, the 14, 15-year-old young men go out into the Serengeti at night, each with a spear, and their task is to catch a lion. Now, if you sent out one teenager at a time to catch a lion, the betting odds are strong for the lion. Is going to come out on top. But if we send them out in a group and they encircle the lion with their spears out, then the difficult task is they've got to pierce the brain of the lion to capture it. But in order to do that, someone has to grab his tail and pull. Now there's the ultimate cooperation, because the timing has to be perfect. Okay? You don't want to pull that tail and the man with the spear in the front is not ready. At the other hand, you don't want to lunge forward with the spear before the other one says, oh, I forgot, I was supposed to pull the tail, and distract him. This is how we've always functioned as human beings. The ability to cooperate, work as a team, take care of one another, contribute to one another. Which brings us to the fifth essential social emotional competencies, and that's responsible contribution. I take responsibility for myself, and I also recognize my social responsibility to contribute to my fellow man, to life. And that extends beyond just my fellow man, but to the world in general. Mentioned Adler, he referred to it as the cosmos, to our environment. What am I doing here to be a responsible contribution? And let me just say a couple things about that, because that's the one that's been on my mind of late. One of the things that seems to be happening in society, especially in more developed countries, is we're gradually losing the possibilities for youth to make a responsible contribution. Someone even once said, youth today occupy the same position in families that used to be held by the family pet. Okay, come over and pay attention to me when I want to pat you and have fun. Go away and leave me alone when I'm busy. Don't pee in the carpet. It's pretty much the only task you have to do. Okay, there's nothing else we need them for. In past centuries, we had children because we needed them to make a contribution. Less than 100 years ago, the average, the United States was a agrarian economy up until 1940. and according to the Census Bureau, and schools didn't hold sessions in the summer and typically had a vacation in the fall and another one in the spring. And why? Because we need them making a responsible contribution in the fields, planting, harvesting, and so forth. And to this day, that schedule of our schools remains the same. We didn't send children to school during times when we needed them on the farm. And the average age at which a child drove the most dangerous and the most expensive piece of equipment on the farm, the tractor, was between the age of 9 and 10. So here's something to think about. What does the typical 9 or 10-year-old do to contribute to the family's well-being? It's the equivalent of driving the family tractor. You're going to give them the keys to the car? Probably not. Best you don't. But where has that gone? And if you talk to people who grew up in early half of the 20th century, there's not so many of them left, but the responsibilities they had just for the family to get by. I remember he grew up in Nebraska. His job was to come home in first grade and get the coal to put in the fireplace, get the fire started, so that the time mother came home, there was a warmth in the house, and they could cook on the stove. If he didn't do his job, we were not eating, and we're cold for most of the good part of the night. Those are things people had to contribute. It is perhaps, we could say, still one of the advantages developing countries have over the developed countries. They still need their kids because they all help out, but it's helping with planting and harvesting, helping to take care of their siblings, helping to gather wood for the stove tonight so we can make a fire and cook dinner. These are all tasks. One of the things we have to be thinking about is, how do we build in tasks where kids feel a sense of needing and contributing? I'll give you one further example on that one, because this, again, you can see I've been thinking about this a lot of lately, observing this. One of the most successful programs for adolescents who are into problems with the courts and substance abuse has been a program in which they're taught certain skills. One was how to rebuild a car, tune an engine. They take old cars and then they give them away to a needing family in the community. Here is a car to help you better your life. The success rate is 80% success. Most programs for adolescents have only a 20% success rate. And as one young man said, I'm not used to giving these kind of things away. I'm more used to stealing them. Yeah, but the tremendous person when I am no longer a person who needs services. I'm a person that provides service. Has a major impact on developing a sense of resilience, competence, social well-being, or mental health. The third component of resilience is development of an optimistic growth mindset. Now, this is an instrument, a lot of work is done by Carol Dweck on this and many other researchers. Excuse me. A growth mindset, we talk about a growth mindset. I'm continuing striving to get better. I can do it. If I work hard enough, I continue to improve. First, a fixed mindset, which is probably best expressed by Popeye the Sailor Man, who said, I am what I am, and that's all that I am. I'm Popeye the Sailor Man. And a fixed mindset says, I am what I am. I can't help it. I'm lucky I have certain gifted abilities and talents, or I'm unlucky and I suffer from this disorder, this dysfunction, this disability, and I'm a passive victim to life. We see a lot of this with clients in counseling and therapy. So how does a growth mindset develop? And one of the things that sometimes bothers me, I see people trying to tell their children or their students how to have a growth mindset. Growth mindset stems out of how people speak to you in your environments, in your ecosystems, the family, the workplace ecosystem, the workplace culture, the school culture, the community culture. Growth mindset develops when people learn to communicate in an effective way, focus on effort, improvement, progress, believing you, being the cheerleader on the sidelines. You can do it. Stay with it. You're improving and noticing that. They reject the fixed mindset. And the fixed mindset is always communicated in language that uses a verb of possession. The verb to be, I am, he is, and the verb to have, he has. I have anxiety. My depression is affecting me, as if these are things on the outside of you that you have no control over. Or he's gifted and talented, a gifted student. And what we find is that is as debilitating as saying you have a learning disability, dyslexia, an anxiety disorder, oppositional defiant disorder. Always amazed me, that one. The term oppositional means there's an opponent. It means it takes two people to tango. I can't be oppositional out in the field by myself. It just does not make sense, but it's part of our language. So learning to teach parents and teachers and supervisors how to talk to people from a growth mindset to encourage further development, and the courage to try. It's important. And I also recognize many kids who have been labeled gifted and talented early in life will later go on to tell you the worst thing that ever happened to me was the day they said, you are gifted, because the bar just went way high and almost impossible to live up to it. And it also is, I'm gifted means I'm gifted, talented across the board. No, we all have gifts. We all have talents. And we're all inept at something, or borderline in other things. It's the nature of being human. So that really kind of boxes them in and oftentimes make people afraid to try, afraid they'll be exposed as not as gifted, talented, capable as people think. And I mentioned that one because this is another thing that concerns me from a resilience perspective. How much our own field, the mental health field, counselors, psychologists, psychiatrists, clinical social workers, contribute to the developing a fixed mindset, a problematic fixed mind in clients, because we talk about our clients as having disorders, having anxiety, suffering from depression. Just the verbs put the client in a passive victim role rather than has not yet learned or has learned to develop anxiety because of the adversity they had. And if they learned it as a way to deal with past situation, because of the plasticity of the brain, I can also now learn new strategies, new ways of approaching. Many of the things we see people come to counseling with are actually just strategies they learned from the situations they were in, and they were creative and they're adaptive. But now, as I grow older, they become problematic, counterproductive. And we need to see it that way rather than he has a disorder. There's something wrong with you. What does that mean? Someone early on in life is told there's something wrong with you that can never change. Okay, so in the fourth cornerstone of developing resilience is having opportunities for developing a positive self-identity. And that kind of reflects back to what I was talking earlier about developing social responsibility, personal and social responsibility, a second ago about social competence. But do I have opportunities in my life for social connection and recognition? Okay, we're a social animal. You know, there's an old TV show, and I'm afraid I might be starting to date myself from the age of some of the people who might listen to this. I've learned to somewhat cope with that. The TV show was called Cheers. A TV show about a group that met at a Boston bar from diverse backgrounds every day, from psychiatrist to mailman to accountant or whatever, and their connection there. And the theme song goes, "Getting through the world today takes everything you got. Wouldn't it be nice to go someplace where everybody knows your name and they're always glad you came?" Okay, that is, in a nutshell, the beginnings of developing resilience. We all need to have a place, hopefully in our families and our schools, our communities, our workplace, someplace where everybody knows my name and they're always glad I came. A sense of that connection, the security of that. Now, interestingly, while we also need a sense of connection, and it almost sounds paradoxical, we also need a sense of personal autonomy. Okay, I need to be connected, but I need to be unique. And we see this all through our life. When children are born into their family, they want to be part of the family. But no one wants to be like their brother or their sister. So, the first person who talked about this, it's sometimes credited to Alfred Adler, but it actually goes back to Darwin. Darwin noticed that if the same species of bird living in an area with limited food supplies, found this in the Galapagos, they will develop different feeding habits, find different ways to get connection. And them food, for humans, it's connection, recognition. So how people work out that sense of personal autonomy. And of course, we all live in different cultures, which will stress the autonomy over connection or connection over autonomy. That's the way ethnic cultures differ, but they're both the same. We need both. I need to be connected, but I want to be unique within that group and respected for that. Third thing we need is a sense of equality and respect, to be treated that way. Nothing creates difficulty more than treating people disrespectfully or as less than, not equal to, speaking down to them. History is loaded with similar history where people were disrespectfully, unequally, and how they fought back. No one accepts that. Okay, whether it's by going slow, disrupting, whatever way to say, I'm not happy with this situation. You see it even in the workplace, where a manager who treats people disrespectfully and talks down to them, they will get you. Slow down production, not be as productive. One of the great indicators of a positive workplace is how many sick days people take. Of course, in a dysfunctional environment where there isn't opportunities for positive self-identity, you'll see a lot of people functioning, taking a lot of sick days, or personal mental health days. Other places where they feel like I'm appreciated here, I'm recognizing my uniqueness, my contribution, I'm treated respectfully, they show up at work, even when you wish they wouldn't, because they're that sick. So that's important all the way. Fourth thing, meaningful contribution. Okay, I talked about this earlier. How do kids today have a meaningful contribution to make? How does anybody feel they have a meaningful contribution to make? Opportunities for that. And we've seen some neat resilience-based programs. For example, schools that was built an elementary school next to a nursing home. People in a nursing home, I'm old, I'm not able to get around, I need help to get by, just feeding myself, clothing myself, but I still need to make a contribution to stay healthy. And there's kids down the street who need a mentor, a grandparent, a pseudo-grandparent, who can read, who can spend one-to-one time with me. Why not put them on the same campus? And the kids get matched up with their adoptive grandparent that go and helps them with their reading once or twice a week. Everybody can find a way to, as we as mental health professionals need to find ways to help our clients feel like they're making, not feel like, actually make a meaningful contribution. One of the things I've noticed, for example, in substance abuse treatment programs, the people who seem to have the best odds of doing well are people who end up becoming sponsors and helping other. Now I'm making a meaningful contribution. I'm not a person in need of services. I'm a person who provides service. That seems to be a key component. And the fifth thing we need is a sense of competence and mastery. Where do we get a sense that I can do some things well? I've mastered a task, whatever it might be, a skill. It's important. And that's important for people to maintain a mentally healthy, resilient attitude. So that's how I see resilience and the components. There's no one way to do all those things. As D. Hawk said, clean out the idea that people have pathologies, people have disorders. Instead, build places from this framework, how creatively can I develop ways to provide these 4 components for my clients, 4 components for people. And again, for my clients as an antidote for young people as they're developing, and whether it be in schools, in our community, and so forth, so they can develop those skills and develop their resilience so they can handle the inevitable issues that will hit them. And none of us get through life unscathed. It's how well we're armored to handle it. So it says we have right now 2 paradigms guiding the mental health field. The psychobiological paradigm that assumes there's a biological or neurological dysfunction that results in emotional behavioral difficulties for its brain chemistry. As Emil Kraepelin in 1875 said, as he developed the first categorical system for categorizing mental and emotional disorders, all problems in human behavior are the result of diseases of the brain. That's 1875. Here we are in 2023, and that model is probably as strong as ever in Western developed nations. We now have a document of DSM-5 is what, 600 pages of different ways that you have a disease of the brain. And people emphasize that, and they treat the brain. We've long treated the brain, whether it be through lobotomies, directed physical attack on the brain, spinning, electric shock, and chemical interventions to treat the brain as if the brain is your problem, rather than, no, it's my life situation and how they've had to adapt to it, and the lack of nurturing environments for me, supportive environments, and the skills I need. So, of course, the other approach is the one of talking the biopsychosocial developmental paradigm, which fits with the resilience approach, that as we grow up, the interaction of our social environment with our psychological development, and that in turn affects our biological functioning, whether it be brain-based, brain chemistry, and so forth, are all combined. But we assume the problem is primarily psychosocial, results in biological difficulties. So treat and develop health in the psychosocial aspect. Of course, that's highlighted best in the recent research called the Adverse Childhood Experiences from the Kaiser Permanente and Center for Disease Control Research, finding the link between childhood trauma and health problems, mental health and physical health problems. It also includes chronic diseases and health difficulties in adults, are highly correlated with adverse social conditions that social ecosystem come from. If you're not familiar, I think most people in the field are now, the ACEs scale is a 10-item questionnaire regarding frequent sources of trauma in children's lives. And people with 0 to 1 adverse childhood experience typically have no mental health difficulties. We start getting a little higher at 2 and 3. Once you hit an ACE score of 4 or higher, you're at high risk of both health difficulties, physical health, and mental health difficulties. Now, adverse childhood experience have been developed from associated with depression, suicide, anxiety, learning difficulties, school dropouts, ADHD, behavioral conduct disorders, substance abuse, addiction, sexuality and relationship issues, domestic violence, impaired work performance, and health problems such as obesity, heart disease, diabetes, lung cancer, autoimmune disorders. The list goes on and on and on. And here's the problem with that. Several things have not yet been really measured very well. There are more than 10 different adverse childhood experiences. Many of them are not even listed on there. How about if growing up in a war zone? Growing up in Ukraine or during the Middle East, the wars in the Middle East and Iraq and Israel and Egypt years ago. How does that affect your development? Psychosocial adjustment. Surviving, recovering from severe accidents. Witnessing abuse. A grandparent or a parent being abused, or a sibling being abused. Peer violence. Neighborhoods. Some neighborhoods are not safe as we'd like them to be. Over my life, I've worked in inner city housing projects, and I've worked in prison settings. And it amazed me how both of them came out looking the same. The first thing both the inmate would say, as well as the adolescent growing up in that dangerous housing project, when you go out your door, you put on your face. Okay? You've got to be as mean or look like you're as mean as everybody else, because it's the only way to survive in this environment. Well, if that's how I survive in my young environment, that's the only skills I have from my other environments, in a healthier environment. And I'm going to use these skills. And that's where we need to help clients develop the social emotional competence of resilience so they're ready. And here's my other problem with the ACEs research and the use of the word trauma. It kind of signifies that it's a major life event. Abuse, for example, physical abuse, sexual abuse. And it leaves out the continuum. So one model I like to use is this classification of ACEs. Actually, is used as a classification system of abuse by a couple of physicians in the United Kingdom, where we think about it as occurring on two levels, or two continuums. On the vertical continuum is how frequent was the abuse, the trauma. How often? Constantly, every once in a while. On the horizontal scale, how toxic, how traumatic was it? High toxicity, physical abuse, sexual abuse, low toxicity, which gets into the most lower toxicity, although maybe saying it wasn't high is concerned, verbal abuse, criticism, emotional abuse, psychological abuse, things that aren't even covered under the law of protective children. And actually, the research says they happen more frequently than the other issues. In fact, even physical abuse, sexual abuse, for example, the problem is less the physical part of the abuse as it is the psychological, social, emotional impact that prolongs through the years afterwards, the repercussions from there. So if we put it this way, we can say all people will deal with adversity in quadrant number 1, low toxicity, low frequency. But if you have developed the skills and the supportive environments of a resilience, you'll be able to, okay, be stunned, buckle at the knees, but then get back on track. But what about the high toxicity, low frequency, every once in a great while? We tend to dismiss that. Or the high frequency, low toxicity, constantly put downs, criticisms, you're not good enough, you're stupid. Or high frequency, of course, we all recognize high frequency, high toxicity as adversity, abuse. But what about the full scale? But the outcome's the same. I like to use the analogy. If you give up, for some people, the abuse or the adversity they dealt with in their life is like being asked to drink a glass of what's I'm looking for, poison. Okay, if I drink it down, I'll die. But if someone just put a drop in my coffee every morning, what will happen? Well, you won't die right away, but you will decline, have difficulties, and eventually it kills you, which consists with the research saying childhood trauma is associated with diabetes, heart disease, autoimmune disorders, and so forth. So we got to think about that. It's across the board. Most people will be identified as dealing with an adverse childhood experience of trauma if they're in quadrant 4, high toxicity, high frequency. We often overlook when it's in 3 and 2.